Hey everybody, my name is Daryl and this is Dion.
Hello.
And welcome to DuoQ. In today's video, we're discussing the cause of video game delays and whether or not the pandemic has as much of an effect on it as we tend to hear. Now that we're queued up and ready to go, let's get started.
Let's start with history. So over the last 10 years, and we could probably go further back, but I'm going to keep it at 10 for now, games have been delayed for various reasons, usually related to different development woes. A few examples of delayed games: Last of Us 2, 4 months delay, which was a regular delay first. There was a regular delay. I believe it was in February, so this is before we really start shutting down. And then it got delayed even further after that, which was then due to the pandemic. So the first delay was not long enough.
Correct.
Zelda Breath of the Wild was supposed to release in 2015, I believe, and it got delayed 2 years to help with development, to make sure it's working right. And then Kingdom Hearts 3 with a full 1 year delay. It was announced, they had a release window, and they completely missed it and delayed it back to keep developing that game further. So games have been delayed for different reasons over the last 10 years.
And as Dion said, it is due to different development woes, some of them being improving the game, and other cases being when the scope and whatnot, or what the game is intended to be, just doesn't fit anymore. But let's start with another example of pushing for the sake of, hey, we're kind of in the middle of a pandemic here. You have stuff like the Final Fantasy XIV 5.3 patch, which was supposed to release, I believe, it released late August of last year, I believe, but it was supposed to release earlier that summer. I could have it wrong, but there was a few months delay due to the pandemic and the slowdown with production. Then you had Cyberpunk 2077, which was delayed mostly due to poor management and the fact they had to restructure the game several times over and over again. And then the pandemic didn't help during development towards the end.
Yeah, that one, I mean, it was a whole thing. Like, they had so much development.
It was a whole thing.
Much creep, so much scope creep.
It was as if it was like, fuck you in particular. Not only are you going to have poor management on your game's development, but you're also going to get a pandemic.
Exactly.
Towards the end there. Like, that just doesn't help. But then you have a case like Resident Evil 4, where the game is delayed due to the fact that they couldn't figure out what they wanted it to be for a while. It had about 3 or 4 iterations, and one of them became Devil May Cry. So something good came out of it besides Resident Evil 4. You know, not saying that it was all bad. It was just, you know, you typically don't want to keep delaying a game like that, but for Resident Evil 4, that's the reason why it was delayed. Duke Nukem Forever, don't get me started on this one. To sum it up, they kept updating and remaking the game over and over again, more or less, to try and keep it relevant with the latest technology until they eventually had to release it. If you want more on that one, I highly recommend watching Mac McMuckles' video, his What Happened video on it. That will explain it a lot better than I could, but that's one example that, again, kind of falls under poor management. You shouldn't keep delaying your game over and over again to keep it up with the latest tech. That just makes no sense in the long run.
Plus, you can't keep up. I mean, basically, it was like multiple remakes, and it failed.
Yeah.
I think that's the...
I feel like had it been released initially in the time when it was supposed to be, while it probably will still have problems, it wouldn't have had nearly as many problems as it did by the time it did, because a lot of that stuff was outdated by then, by the time it did come out. That was like, what, 14, 15 years of a delay?
Yeah, I didn't play it because I heard it was bad. And I was right. And it was right. So, I mean, you've mentioned a lot of games. And so games have been delayed for years. This stuff has happened. And does point out different reasons all the time. The pandemic, I feel, is just a popular one that's been used. And it's real. It is delaying games for sure. But it's used a lot as an excuse. But that's not the only thing causing these delays.
Correct. But since the pandemic is something that can be perceived as a new popular reason, despite it being legit, you know, some people want to be a little skeptical and whatnot about why some games are being developed. Yes, the pandemic is out there, but there has to be more to it. So we're going to go into why games can be delayed for the reasons that we said in the examples, but we're going to go into more detail now. So if you want to head that part off, Dion.
Sure. So we did mention a lot of these, but just to reiterate, games having a larger scope or scope creep tends to be a big one. Cyberpunk 2077, I think, suffered the most from this.
Correct.
But there's other games that have had a lot of scope creep, or they decide to add something new to the game, and it works, but it adds time. Poor planning and management. With any project in any industry, it has to be managed well.
Yeah.
And it is very easy in the video game industry to fail at planning or managing a project correctly. People are new, the company's smaller, it could be multiple reasons. Even bigger companies suffer from this. So that's definitely a reason. And then they let that person go, someone else takes over, then it kind of starts up again, right?
Yeah.
Creative process is iterative, which can result in delays. And I actually got this from one of our linked articles, so make sure you check those out. You got to think about how you design something. You take it and you come up with a mechanic. Well, let's say that mechanic doesn't work. Well, you scrap that and you come up with a different mechanic maybe. Or maybe you have a mechanic that does work, but you want to make it smoother or work better or make it fit the game. So this is an iterative process. It always gets better with time. You're always scrapping and adding to it. Well, sometimes you can get so far along that you're scrapping a lot. And if you're scrapping a big piece, then you're losing a lot of time, and then it's going to take longer. And this could be a level. This could be a gameplay. It could be a character design. It could be a lot of things.
One of them, actually, an example of that comes to mind would be the initial creation of Uncharted, which was supposed to be Jak 4 originally. And the development didn't get like super far, but a lot of that those pre-production stages and whatnot, and not really being familiar with the PlayStation 3's hardware or whatnot at the time, kind of, I won't say it screwed them over, but it kind of put them in a bit of a pinch because they realized, okay, for what we're going for here, Jak isn't going to work in this area. Technically speaking, we don't know the PS3's infrastructure as well as we did the PlayStation 2, so we have to be more linear. And then just the fact that the art direction changed altogether to the point where Jak and Daxter no longer looked like Jak and Daxter. That's how you got Nathan Drake and everyone else. And to make that change, they had to push back, not delay necessarily, not in the public eye because the game wasn't even announced yet by then, but within the company, they were like, okay, we gotta take a bit longer with production just to make this shift into what Uncharted became.
That's a very interesting fact, actually. I just want to do one more reason I have, and it's a pandemic reason that we should look at, is the ability to force in-person collaboration. So without being in person, really, what does that mean? And that means they can't necessarily be focused all the time, or they're working different hours. People have kids interrupt them, they can't work as consistently, or they can't be on a call at a certain time. So those are the things that are affected by the pandemic, and definitely affects your quality of the game you can make and the time it takes. 100%. Daryl, why don't you give us a more in-depth look here on your thoughts?
Sure. While game delays have always been around and more frequent, they seem to be more frequent at least, with every year as time goes by, as they increase in scope and size to meet the demands of consumers who want bigger sooner, despite the fact that that's not always possible, depending on the game and the franchise we're talking about. To say that the recent influx in game delays is not influenced by the pandemic is simply not true. Not saying that's what Dion's saying, but there are some people who, again, want to be like, oh, well, it's easy to lean on the pandemic. What's the real reason? Well, in Jason Schreier, I hate saying his last name sometimes. In Jason Schreier's Bloomberg article from earlier this year titled, "COVID is delaying all the video games," Schreier says, and I quote, "Delays were common even before the emergence of a deadly pandemic that has disrupted workplaces across the world. But with COVID-19 forcing game developers to work remotely, the industry has found itself dealing with more production issues than usual at the same time that people are stuck at home and clamoring for more games. Game sales may go up, but development has slowed to a crawl. Examples of something like this happening are like with games like Hogwarts Legacy, which I completely forgot about, to be completely honest.
Looks awesome, though.
Yeah, I'm not going to lie. That was pushed into 2022, apparently. I didn't know that until I looked it up. It was pushed into 2022 as a result, despite it originally being planned to drop this fall. Returnal was delayed by 6 weeks before it launched, And even giants like Nintendo have expressed development issues with their products thanks to the pandemic, which is one of the major reasons why we hadn't seen more regarding Breath of the Wild 2 temp title. I'm going to butcher his name. Eiji Aonuma apologized for during one of Nintendo's live streams earlier this year. But with that said, at the same time, as Dion alluded to, game development is not a one-to-one thing in game studios. Sucker Punch develops their games differently than Square Enix and probably gets them out sooner.
Much sooner.
Each studio has their own culture and philosophy for development, as well as different means of producing their games. Some studios can seemingly fart out a game and get praise for it, despite the game being an exact same copy of it with a different subtitle and a number or something like that. But other studios take as long as they feel they must before releasing their games, or hell, even announcing their game. And that's not even the half of it. As the expectations for blockbuster games rise in gamers, so too must the developer in regard to raising the quality bar every damn time to develop a game. This results in longer development periods as well, and in my opinion can result in the publisher, assuming the developer isn't the publisher as well, pushing for the game's reveal to start accumulating, pre-orders, because publishers, investors, they don't like to sit on games for too long. They, hurry up, release that game. We need that money. You know what I'm saying?
Make that money. They're investing for money. Yep.
Yeah. They might deal with one delay, they might deal with two, but if you have goodwill with an investor or a publisher and whatnot, like if you can deliver, you might have more wiggle room in that sense. Not everyone has that though.
Not most. We should say not most.
Not most. Like Naughty Dog, they could probably get away with it. In my opinion, they could definitely get away with that. Hey, we need 5 years. 100%. Okay, well, you got 5 years. Hell, you got 8. It depends.
But you need to take half your team and make Last of Us 3. Go ahead. Thank you.
Essentially. You got to scratch my bag, I'll scratch yours, essentially. After that, it's a matter of fan reaction and how they react to the initial announcement once the announcement does go up, assuming you were pressured to reveal early. An example, well, just type in Craig for Halo Infinite and you'll get the point. Not saying that is the sole reason for Halo Infinite's delay from fall 2020 to holiday of this year, 2021, but I'd argue the backlash ultimately helped them go back to the drawing board and see what they could touch up on, which could have led to the, okay, but if we want to do all this, we'll have to delay conversation I'm sure investors love to hear. But from there, let's move on to our final thoughts. Is the pandemic weighing as much on the delays as we think it is, or is it a mix of what we've already known?
So to answer this, I feel like games have always faced delays, much like other projects in other industries. Construction has these delays, entertainment, it's a thing that you face when you're running a project, no matter what. And then even after the pandemic, we shall see some more video game delays. It's not something that's really going to go away. Yeah. But we cannot deny that the pandemic has had an effect, and there has been a lot more delays than usual, and this is affecting a lot of industries once again. So I believe we can make that conclusion, but it is not going to be over. There will still be scope creep, there will still be bad management, and there will still be early announcements that never get released. Star Wars 1313. We talked about it in the last video.
Yeah, watch that shit.
Your thoughts?
Sure. In my mind, the pandemic hasn't necessarily given developers a new excuse to delay their games. Much like Dion said, it's kind of just a given that's delaying everybody. But it's kind of exemplifying, if that's the word I want to use. It's emphasizing, is what I want to say. It's emphasizing the issues the issues that we've already mentioned. And on top of that, with the work from home structure, there also come issues with, okay, how do we get the audio guy to get his equipment into his studio at home? Are they going to be able to work comfortably? How are we going to do animation? Do we send them into the studio and then send them back out? There's a lot of stuff that's mixed in there that the pandemic is not helping with. But even besides that, we still have the issues that we've already known and trepidatiously love. Trepidatiously is not what I want to say there. But there you go. It's been said. Not to mention the obvious fact that if you're working from home and whatnot, you're under NDA and this and the other, you also have that issue where your walls might not be as thick as they could be. I'm looking at you, thin walled apartments. So
that's not bad.
It's a thing that you think about in the back of your head occasionally. Like, I don't know, if you've ever,
it's not that bad. I have NDA stuff all the time. It's not that bad.
I guess. I mean, I do too. I guess it's just one of those things of if you're not used to bringing your work home initially, if it's gonna feel awkward. I think that's the point I'm getting to. It's gonna feel awkward, but we're not talking about the awkwardness of working from home. We could one of these days, but in the meantime, to keep it succinct, the pandemic emphasized the issues that we already have in the industry and just made them more apparent. Thankfully, some studios are noticing this even more so now and are trying to rectify that so that once things calm down, the process could ideally be smoother, but time will tell.
Alrighty, I think that's all we've got for now. Thank you all for stopping through to listen here at DuoQ. I challenge you guys to tell us what you think. What are your thoughts on the pandemic and the cause of delays? Are there more that we didn't discuss? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to share and leave a like. Next time you're waiting for a party or searching for a lobby, feel free to tune in again while you wait. See ya!
Later, guys. And sorry, give me about a year and I'll have a witty remark for this.